Hey, what's up everybody? This is Dr. Andrew Kim. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist, and today we're going to continue our series on how to fall asleep fast, and we're going to focus on foods to avoid or limit in order to help you achieve that goal. Now, I understand that everyone's bodies and sensitivities to these different foods and drinks are going to be different, so these are just general suggestions for you to think about as we review the different drinks and foods to avoid to help you fall asleep fast. Number one, caffeinated beverages. I know this seems obvious, but let's just remind ourselves that we should limit our caffeine intake through things like coffee, energy drinks, caffeinated sodas. Caffeine can screw with your sleep in two different ways. Number one, it's a natural stimulant. Basically, this can make it harder for you to fall asleep and stay asleep at night. And number two, it tends to make people go pee more. So now you got two different reasons why caffeine can screw with your sleep. Now, the thing to remember is it can also take your body a long time to clear out the caffeine that you drank during the day, okay? So if you remember my previous video on energy drinks, I reminded everybody it could take up to 12 hours for all of that caffeine to be cleared out of your system. So try your best to not drink too much caffeine past lunchtime if possible, especially if you're sensitive to it. Now, I know some of you out there are saying, duh, I know that Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Mountain Dew, I know these sodas have caffeine, so you're not teaching me anything new. But I can't tell you how many of my patients don't realize that certain non-Coca-Cola, non-Pepsi sodas also contain caffeine. Things like Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper, a can of that has about half a cup of coffee's worth of caffeine in it. Even orange sodas of all things, like Orange Sunkist, a can of that has about a fourth a cup of coffee's worth of caffeine. So although it doesn't sound like a lot, if you're sensitive to caffeine or you're already having sleep troubles, it's something you may not realize may be adding to the problem. Okay, so always look at the caffeine content of your sodas. Another tricky one is decaf coffee. So who would have thought? It's called decaf, so most people think there's no caffeine in it. But even decaf coffee has a little bit in there. It's about 10%, so about 1/10 the amount of caffeine that a typical cup of coffee has. But again, if you're sensitive to caffeine or you're having sleep problems already, realize that even though you're drinking it for the taste, even decaf has some caffeine in it. Number two, chocolate. Yes, chocolate is a hidden source of caffeine, and it pains me to say that because I love chocolate. I have a huge sweet tooth, but chocolate does contain some caffeine, and in particular, dark chocolate, which is my favorite. The darker the chocolate, the more caffeine it tends to contain. For example, a full typical bar of Hershey's dark chocolate has about the same amount of caffeine as about a third a cup of coffee. So realize that it's not that you can't eat chocolate, but just don't eat chocolate too late in the day or right before bed, because even that contains some caffeine in it. Moving on to number three, ice cream. All the good stuff is on this list. So why did ice cream make the list of things that we need to limit or avoid too close to bedtime? Well, for two reasons. Number one, because of its high saturated fat content and because of its dairy content, for some people, this can be a risk factor for worsening heartburn or acid reflux, and that'll make you feel uncomfortable and make it harder for you to fall asleep or stay asleep. And depending on the flavors of ice cream that you're going to eat, again, chocolate flavors, coffee flavors, we reviewed this already, chocolate and coffee can contain caffeine. For example, a half a cup of Haagen-Dazs coffee-flavored ice cream has the same amount of caffeine as about a quarter cup of coffee, okay? And you may say, again, that's not a lot, Dr. Kim, but who really stops at eating a tiny amount of Haagen-Dazs ice cream? You're going to eat a bunch. So again, even ice cream can contain caffeine, and for some people, ice cream can worsen heartburn. Moving on to number four, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and beans. So why the heck would I be listing all these vegetables and beans? Well, first off, let me say These things are good for you. So I'm not saying avoid vegetables and avoid beans. These are usually part of a healthy, well-balanced diet, okay? But all of these things contain a specific type of sugar called raffinose, okay? Raffinose. These all contain that specific sugar, and our bodies can't break this down. So what does that lead to? We can't break it down, and it leads to our bodies feeling bloated and gassy, and equals a lot of farting, okay? Yeah, I said it, farts, all right? So bloatedness and gassiness. Now, again, everyone has a different sensitivity, but think about it. If you're the type of person who tends to get gassy and bloated from the things I listed here, maybe it's in your best interest to not eat them too late in the day or evening and limit the amount you eat close to bedtime, okay? And I know you're saying, like, who's making, vegetables late at night? I get it. But it's probably more relevant to those late night Taco Bell, Chipotle runs when you're eating tacos, burritos, nachos that contain beans. And again, if you're sensitive to this, something to think about. Number 5, overly greasy and fatty meals too close to bedtime. Okay. Now, I'm not just stating this for the obvious reasons of the risks of weight gain and the risks of what it's going to do to your cholesterol levels, but it's going to screw with your sleep in 2 ways. Number 1, eating high-fat meals too close to bedtime, again, risk of heartburn and keeping you up. But number 2, let's focus more on the fat content itself, okay? Meals with a high amount or a high level of saturated fats have been linked repeatedly to issues with falling asleep and getting that re-energizing, rejuvenating, deep phase sleep, okay? Each night we go through different phases of sleep, but it's those deep phases of sleep that make us feel energized the next day, that help us with our memory and concentration, and eating meals with too much saturated fats will cause us to get less deep phase sleep, okay? So those late night runs to White Castle, Mickey D's, gotta limit them, okay? Number 6, sneaky foods that can worsen heartburn, okay? Now, I know we've talked about heartburn or acid reflux. That's that feeling you get when food is coming up from your stomach and causing that burning sensation in the center of your chest when that food is coming up, okay? So that's what I mean by heartburn or acid reflux. Now, I know we've stated the obvious, eating a ton of food, a ton of greasy, fatty foods, that can put you at risk of worsening heartburn. But there are other things that are less obvious that can put you at risk for worsening heartburn or acid reflux. One of those things are tomatoes, okay? Now, I know no one out there is just like munching on a bunch of tomatoes at midnight, okay? But even tomato-based foods, things like pizza, which has tomato-based sauce on it, pastas, okay? Pastas and pizzas with tomato-based sauce. I know plenty of people out there are having late-night pizza. So it's not just the greasy and fattiness, but just the fact that it has tomato-based sauce can also be an added risk factor for heartburn. Now, this next one might be a little bit surprising for some, but milk. Yes, milk is one of those sneaky drinks that can actually be a risk factor for worsening acid reflux or heartburn. Now, I know some of you out there are going to say, well, Dr. Kim, I swear when I have a glass of milk, it helps me knock me out at night. I get it. But again, for other people, milk can be a risk factor for worsening heartburn, okay? The fattier the milk content, the higher the risk that it can worsen heartburn. It's the higher fat content that relaxes that flap that keeps your stomach closed, and it relaxes it to the point where it opens up, and that's what allows the food content to come back up. So if you're sensitive, think about if you're drinking milk at night. And I'm going to wrap it all up with number 7, alcohol. Yes, alcohol too close to bedtime. I know I mentioned this in my sleep hygiene video, but I'm going to say it again because this is the one that patients either refuse to listen to or refuse to believe me on, all right? But I am telling you, although drinking alcohol right before bed might help you fall asleep faster, it does 2 things, and these are facts. Number 1, you will get less total amount of sleep, okay? So the total amount of sleep you get will go down. Number 2, you will have more awakenings or wake up too early, okay? So drinking alcohol too close to bed will equal less amount of sleep and more awakenings, all right? So try not to drink alcohol too close to bedtime. So look, I hope that you really enjoyed this video and hopefully you learned at least one new fact today. Now the reality is, I know that insomnia and sleep troubles, these are difficult issues to address, all right? There is no magic bullet, there is no magic pill, there is no magic cure for this stuff, okay? It's gonna take effort and work, all right? It's gonna take practicing good sleep hygiene from the tips that we described in my other video. It's gonna take looking in the mirror and seeing, are there certain foods and drinks that we talked about that you need to limit? It's gonna take looking at your medical and psychiatric issues and addressing those, looking at your medications and your supplements, making sure that there's no side effects for insomnia and trying to adjust those as needed, okay? It's gonna take looking at all these things and trying to influence these things in a healthy way to help you get a good night's sleep, a good night's rest, and get into a good routine so that you can get some peace and you can feel rejuvenated, all right? If you like this type of content, please like this video, please subscribe, please stay tuned. We're going to continue this series on how to fall asleep and how to get a good night's rest, okay? We're going to talk about things like foods you can eat to hopefully help promote sleep. We're going to talk about things like melatonin, how much and when to take it. So please stay tuned. This is Dr. Andrew Kim signing off. Be healthy, be well. Please, please stay safe, everybody. Have a good night.